Black single dad finds his CEO sitting alone at a Christmas party. What he did next shocked
Cheers,
everyone.
everyone.
The
Merry
ballroom of the
Christmas.
Harlow and Associates headquarters had been transformed into something out of a holiday catalog. Garlands of fresh pine lined the balcony railings. A 12-foot Christmas tree anchored the far wall, its white lights reflected in the polished marble floor. Waitstaff moved between tables in black uniforms, carrying trays of champagne flutes that caught the light like small flames. In 4 hours, the company would finalize
Adjust
the
that table
largest
slightly
merger
to the
in its
left.
30-year history.
We must keep to the
In
schedule
4
tonight.
hours,
Ensure
everything
the
was
folders
supposed
are
to be
placed correctly
perfect.
for the signing.
Daniel Mercer noticed the thermostat first. He always noticed the thermostat. That was his job, to notice the things that everyone else had stopped seeing. The loose hinge on the supply closet door on the 3rd floor, the water pressure drop in the East Wing restrooms every Tuesday morning, the heating unit behind the stage that had been making a low grinding sound for the past 2 weeks and had officially chosen tonight, of all nights, to begin failing. He carried his toolbox through a side corridor, away from the guests in their evening wear, away from the catering staff arranging centerpieces, away from the executives rehearsing their remarks at the podium. He was used to moving through spaces like a current of air present enough to do the work, invisible enough that no one felt the need to acknowledge him. Daniel was 39 years old. He had worked the night shift at Harlow and Associates for 6 years. In that time, he had learned the building the way a person learns a house they grew up in, not from blueprints, but from memory. He knew which elevator doors stuck in cold weather. He knew that the CFO's office had a slow drain that backed up every November. He knew that the heating unit behind the ballroom stage needed a specific sequence of resets to come back online after a power fluctuation, a sequence that was not written in any manual because he had figured it out himself at 2 in the morning during a board retreat 3 winters ago. He also knew, without having been told, that tonight was not a night to be visible. He set his toolbox down near the stage access panel, crouched, and got to work. Through the gap between the stage curtain and the wall, he had a partial view of the ballroom. Tables set for 300, name placards in gold foil, a long table at the front of the room, elevated slightly, where the signing ceremony would take place. And at the table of honor, sitting alone, was Diana Harlow. He recognized her from the company directory photo that was printed on the laminated sheet posted in the break room. In the photo, she was standing at a podium, mid-sentence, one hand raised in a gesture of emphasis. She looked like a woman who had never once been uncertain about what she was about to say. The woman sitting alone at the table of honor did not look like that photograph. She was in a dark evening gown, her posture exact, her expression unreadable in the way that takes years of practice to achieve. But her right hand was flat on the table beside her untouched champagne, and in her left hand she held a phone that was vibrating. She looked at it the way a person looks at something they are afraid of. The screen lit up again. She turned it face down. Daniel looked away and returned to the heating unit. He pulled the access panel off and set it quietly on the floor. He reached in, found the secondary relay, and began the reset sequence from memory. Behind him, the sound of the ballroom continued low music, the clink of glasses, the murmur of 300 people who did not know that the woman at the center of this evening was sitting alone, ignoring a phone call from a number he had seen clearly when he passed. St. Clair Medical Center. Labor and delivery. He told himself it was not his business. He told himself he had a job to finish. He reached into his shirt pocket and touched, without pulling it out, a folded piece of paper that he had carried for the past 8 months. A list, written in his own handwriting, of 17 occasions. A school play, a parent-teacher conference, 3 birthday dinners, a Saturday morning when Sophie had asked him to come watch her try out for the school swim team, and he had texted back that he could not make it, double shift, and she had texted back "Okay, Dad," and nothing else. He had not written down the reasons next to any of them. He did not need to. He knew every one by heart. He had only written X. 17 of them. He was reaching back into the access panel when Diana Harlow's phone slipped in her hand. She grabbed it, but her thumb caught the speaker button, and for 2 seconds, before she cut it off, a voice filled the small space between them. A young woman's voice, unsteady. "Mom, I am scared. The doctor said there are complications. Please, just this once, please." The call ended. Diana sat very still. She placed the phone face down on the table again, straightened the centerpiece that did not need straightening, and looked toward the stage, as though she were checking the lighting. Daniel picked up his wrench. He began to turn a bolt that did not need turning. A minute passed. Then 2. "You can stop pretending to work," Diana said. Her voice was quiet. She was not looking at him. Daniel set the wrench down. He stood, slowly, and stepped out from beside the stage curtain. He was still holding the access panel in one hand. He was in his work uniform, gray shirt, dark pants, steel-toed boots. His name was printed on a patch above his left breast pocket. Diana was looking at the table in front of her. She spoke as though continuing a conversation she had already been having with herself for some time. "If someone had missed the most important moments of your life for 3 years in a row," she said, "do you think showing up once would actually fix anything?" Daniel stood for a moment. He set the access panel down against the wall, quietly. He pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. "You will never know," he said, "if you stay here." Diana looked at him for the first time. Not the way an executive looks at a maintenance worker who has overstepped, not with irritation or dismissal. She looked at him the way a person looks at someone who has just said something they were not prepared to hear. She studied the name patch on his shirt. She looked at his hands, still slightly greased from the access panel. She looked at the toolbox on the floor beside the stage. Then she looked away again. "You are going to tell me that family comes first," she said. "That no deal is worth more than a person. That I will regret this." "I was not going to tell you anything," Daniel said. "You asked me a question." She turned her champagne glass slowly in her hand without drinking from it. "My daughter's name is Natalie. She is 31. We have not spoken in 3 years. Daniel did not respond. He had learned, over years of working alone in empty rooms, that silence was not always something that needed to be filled. "She lost a pregnancy," Diana continued. Her voice remained level, the way a voice does when a person has told themselves a story so many times that the telling no longer reaches them. "She called me from the emergency room. I was in the middle of closing a deal in Singapore. I told her I would get on the first flight I could. I finished the meeting first." She set the champagne glass down. "By the time I landed, she had already been discharged. She did not answer my calls. She did not answer for 3 weeks. Then she sent me a letter 1 page that said she was not angry. She said she finally understood who I was, and she needed time to decide what to do with that understanding." Diana paused. "That was 3 years ago. Tonight was the first time she called." The music from the ballroom shifted to something slower. Somewhere near the entrance, a small group laughed at something, the sound bright and brief. Then, "This is the first time you can answer," Daniel said. "It is not that simple. I know it is not." "No," she said, and for the first time there was something sharp in her voice, not anger at him, but the particular sharpness of a person who is tired of being misunderstood. "You do not understand. This company employs 412 people. The restructuring debt comes due in 6 months. Without this merger, we go into default. That means layoffs. That means families, not one family, not my families who had nothing to do with any of my mistakes lose their income in January." She looked directly at him. "Are you ready to ask me to let that happen, so I can go hold my daughter's hand?" Daniel opened his mouth. Then he closed it. He thought about Sophie, about the insurance card in his wallet, the one with the Harlow and Associates logo in the corner, the one that covered the cardiology appointments, the prescription refills, the echocardiogram, every 6 months to check the valve they had been monitoring since she was 4 years old. He thought about the number on the last explanation of benefits statement, the amount the insurance had covered, the amount that would have been his to pay without it. He had done the math once, at the kitchen table, late at night, and then he had folded the paper and put it in a drawer and not looked at it again. His hand moved, almost without his knowing, to the toolbox beside him. He picked it up. "Mr. Mercer." The voice came from behind him, measured, certain of itself. Daniel turned. Robert Greer, the company's chief operating officer, was standing at the edge of the stage curtain. He was a tall man in his late 50s, silver-haired, wearing a tuxedo with the ease of someone who had worn one most of his adult life. He was holding a tablet computer loosely at his side. His expression was not unkind. It was simply resolved. "I think there may have been some confusion about tonight's schedule," Robert said. He looked at Daniel with the particular patience of a man who had decided in advance not to raise his voice. The technical work for this evening was to be completed before the guests arrived. "The heating unit behind the stage had a relay failure," Daniel said. "I was called in at 7. Then, the unit has been repaired, and you are finished," Robert said. He extended one hand toward the service corridor. "The technical staff area is through that door. There is coffee and food back there. You are welcome to stay until the end of your shift." The gesture was courteous and absolute. Daniel looked at Diana. She had turned back toward the ballroom, her hands folded on the table in front of her, her posture resuming its earlier precision. She had already made her decision. She was simply waiting for the room to cooperate with it. He picked up the access panel and his toolbox. He walked toward the service corridor. Robert fell into step beside him and lowered his voice as they passed through the door. "I want to be straightforward with you," Robert said. He stopped walking and turned to face Daniel in the narrow hallway. He held out the tablet. On the screen was a spreadsheet, department names in the left column, employee counts in the middle, a column on the right marked Phase 1 reduction. "I reviewed every department file this afternoon to prepare for the board briefing. I know your situation. I know about your daughter's coverage." He paused. "If this merger does not close tonight, these are the departments that restructure first. Effective the first of the year." Daniel looked at the screen. His own department was third from the top. 12 names. His was among them. Beside the department heading, in a smaller column, was a notation: "Benefits termination, January 1st. He handed the tablet back without speaking. "I am not showing you this to threaten you," Robert said. "I am showing you because you seem like a man who thinks before he acts. Those are 412 people. Many of them have families. Many of them have situations like yours. Diana Harlow has 25 minutes to sign that contract. What happens in this building tonight affects every single one of those people. I need you to understand that." Daniel said nothing. Robert nodded once, as though Daniel had agreed to something, and walked back toward the ballroom. Daniel stood alone in the hallway. Through the wall, he could hear the ballroom filling further, the sound of more voices, the particular energy of a room building toward an event. He leaned against the wall and closed his eyes for a moment. He thought about the spreadsheet. He thought about Natalie's voice on the speaker, the 2 seconds of it, the fear in it that no amount of composure could have hidden. He reached into his pocket and took out his phone. There was a voicemail from Sophie, left at 9:17. He pressed play and held the phone to his ear. Her voice was unhurried. She had clearly recorded it sitting somewhere comfortable, maybe the couch, maybe her bed. She sounded fine. She sounded like herself. "Dad, I know you have to work tonight. It is okay. I already ate, and I am watching that show you said was too scary for me, which it is not, by the way." A small pause. "I just wanted to say Merry Christmas. And I know you always worry about everything. But I do not need you to fix everything. I just hope one day you do not feel like you have to choose anymore." The message ended. Daniel stood in the hallway with the phone at his side for a long time. Somewhere in the ballroom, the music stopped. A microphone came on. Robert's voice began welcoming the guests, beginning the formal portion of the evening, thanking everyone for being present for this historic night. 12 minutes remained before midnight. Daniel looked down at his toolbox. He set it down against the wall, not because he had decided anything yet, just because he was tired of carrying it. He stood in the hallway and listened to Robert's voice on the other side of the door, moving through the prepared remarks with the fluency of someone who had rehearsed them many times. He heard the applause at the right moments. He heard the sound of 300 people who believed that what was happening tonight was straightforward, a business decision, a financial transaction, the kind of event that got written up in trade publications and framed on office walls. He reached into his shirt pocket and took out the folded piece of paper. He unfolded it slowly. The handwriting was his small, even, the kind of handwriting that comes from someone who learned to be precise with small spaces. 17 lines, 17 dates, 17 marks, each one identical, each one standing in for something he had told himself at the time was unavoidable. He read through the list once. He thought about the man his father had been. Not a bad man, not a cruel one, a man who worked double shifts and came home smelling like machine oil and fell asleep in his chair before dinner was cleared. A man who had, at Daniel's high school graduation, shaken his hand and said, "I am proud of you, son," with a conviction that Daniel had not doubted for a single second and who had missed every single thing that led to that moment. A man who believed, with complete sincerity, that providing was the same as being present. Daniel had spent most of his adult life being afraid he was becoming that man. He thought about what it would mean for Sophie to grow up watching her father choose silence at the moments that required something harder. He thought about what she would remember. Not the insurance card, not the covered prescriptions, something less visible and more permanent, the shape of a man who had looked at the right thing to do and chosen the easier thing instead. He folded the paper again. He put it back in his pocket. Then he took out his employee badge, held it for a moment, and walked back through the door. The ballroom was fully assembled now. The overhead lights had been dimmed, and the stage was lit from above, warm and deliberate, the kind of lighting that makes everything look more significant than it is. The signing table had been moved to center stage, a long table covered in white cloth, with 2 chairs, 2 copies of the contract, and 2 pens in a presentation case. The partner company's lead representative, a man Daniel did not know, was already seated on the right side. The chair on the left was for Diana. She was standing near the base of the stage steps, speaking in low tones with 2 members of the board. Her posture was composed. Her hands were still. She looked like a woman who had made her decision and was done reconsidering it. Robert saw Daniel enter from the service corridor and began moving toward him immediately, crossing the room with the measured speed of a man trying not to look like he was crossing the room with urgency. Daniel did not wait for him. He reached into his collar, unclipped his badge, and held it out as Robert arrived. "I quit," Daniel said, quietly, without drama. "That means you cannot fire me." Robert stared at him. "Daniel, thank you for the 6 years," Daniel said. "The benefits were good." He placed the badge in Robert's hand and walked toward the stage. Robert did not follow him. Perhaps he calculated that stopping him physically would create more disruption than letting him speak. Perhaps he simply did not move quickly enough. Daniel did not look back to find out. He walked up the 3 steps to the stage. The room noticed him the way a room notices something that does not belong, a gradual shifting of attention, a ripple of turned heads moving from the back of the room toward the front. He heard someone near the stage say something in a low voice. He heard a chair scrape. He stopped at the edge of the signing table and set his badge down on top of the contract. The room went quiet. Not the polite quiet of an audience waiting for a program to begin. The particular quiet of 300 people trying to understand what they are seeing. Diana had stopped at the base of the stage steps. She was looking at him. Her expression had not changed, but something behind it had some quality of absolute certainty had shifted slightly, like a wall that has not yet cracked but has begun, somewhere deep in its structure, to move. Daniel looked out at the room. He was aware of how he appeared: work uniform, steel-toed boots, grease still faint on his knuckles. He was aware that he was standing on a stage that had not been built for him, in a room full of people who did not know his name. He was aware that he had just handed away the thing that kept his daughter's medication covered, and that he did not have a plan for what came next, and that none of that had stopped him. He spoke at a normal volume. The room was quiet enough that he did not need to raise his voice. "I am nobody here," he said. "I fix things after everyone goes home. Most of you have never seen me before tonight, and will not remember me after." He paused. "I have worked in this building for 6 years. I know what it looks like when it is empty. I have been in every room in this place at 2 in the morning when the only sound is the heat coming on. And I want to tell you something about what I have learned from that." He looked at the room, not at any single person, at the whole of it. "Empty rooms all look the same," he said. "It does not matter if it is a corner office or a break room or a conference room with a view of the whole city. When the people are gone, it is just walls and furniture. The building does not mean anything without the people who come home to someone at the end of the day." He picked up his badge from the contract. He held it for a moment, then set it back down beside the contract, not on top of it. "You can sign that," he said, looking at Diana now. "I understand why you would. I understand what is at stake, and I understand the math, and I am not standing here pretending it is simple." He stopped. "But I was in the hallway when your daughter called. I heard her voice for 2 seconds. And I have a daughter too, and I know the difference between the problems you can solve later and the ones that do not wait." The room was absolutely still. "Your daughter called you," he said. "She was scared. She reached out after 3 years of silence because tonight she needed her mother. That is the whole story. Everything else is a number on a page." He stepped back from the table. He had said what he came to say. He was done. The silence held for 3 seconds, maybe 4. Then someone in the back of the room shifted, and the spell broke into the ordinary sounds of a crowd beginning to process something. Diana had not moved from the base of the stage steps. She was looking at Daniel, but her expression had changed. She was no longer looking at him like a problem she was calculating. She was looking at him like a person. Then her phone, which she had placed in her jacket pocket on silent, lit up against the fabric. She reached for it automatically, the way you reach for something when your hand already knows what it wants. She looked at the screen. She stood very still for a long moment. Then she turned the phone so that no one else could see it, looked at it one more time, and closed her eyes briefly. What she had seen was this: a photograph. A newborn, minutes old, wrapped in a hospital blanket, eyes closed, features still new to the world. And below the photograph, a message from Natalie, 3 lines, sent 12 minutes ago, delivered now, that the phone had come back into range. "He looks like Dad. I named him after him. I did not think I was going to call you tonight. I am glad I did." Diana put the phone back into her pocket. She looked at the board members standing to her right. She looked at the partner representative seated at the signing table, who was watching her with an expression of carefully managed uncertainty. She looked at Robert, who was standing at the foot of the stage with his tablet held against his chest, his face unreadable. She looked at the contract. Then she looked at the 300 people in the room, her employees, her board, her guests, all of them watching her make a decision that would determine what kind of person she was going to be. "I need to ask the board to assume operational authority for the remainder of the evening," she said. Her voice was clear and steady, effective immediately. The chair of the board looked up from the table, held her gaze for a moment, and gave a single nod. Diana was already walking toward the exit. She drove herself. She did not call ahead. She walked into St. Clair Medical Center at 12:47 in the morning, still in her evening gown, her heels loud on the hospital corridor floor. A nurse at the labor and delivery desk looked up, took in the sight of her, and quietly checked a room number without being asked. "Room 314. Diana stood outside the door for a long moment. She thought about the 3 years of unanswered calls and the one letter that had arrived in her office on an ordinary Tuesday, the one she had read twice and then placed in a drawer because she did not know what to do with the truth it contained. She thought about what she had chosen, again and again, in the years since. She thought about what it would mean to walk through this door with nothing to offer except herself, no explanation, no justification, no plan for making things right. Just her presence. Just showing up. She put her hand flat against the door. Then she knocked, softly. Natalie's voice came from inside. "Come in." She pushed the door open. Natalie was in the bed, propped up on pillows, the expression on her face complicated in the way that only the faces of people who have been through something enormous can be complicated, exhausted, and wrecked, and, underneath all of it, quietly lit from within. In her arms was a bundle wrapped in a pale yellow blanket. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Diana stood just inside the doorway. She did not move toward the bed. She did not make any claim on the room. She waited. "His name is Thomas," Natalie said finally. "After Dad." Diana nodded. Her throat moved. "I did not think you would come," Natalie said. Not accusing, just saying it plainly, the way you state a fact you have had time to accept. "I almost did not," Diana said. That was all she said. She did not explain further. She did not offer context or justification. She had learned, too late and at great cost, That explanation was often just another form of taking up space that belonged to someone else. Natalie looked at her for a long moment. Then she looked down at Thomas, asleep in her arms, his small chest rising and falling with the total peacefulness of someone who had not yet learned that the world required anything from him. "You can sit down," Natalie said. "If you want." Diana crossed the room and sat in the chair beside the bed. She did not reach for the baby. She did not reach for her daughter's hand. She simply sat in the chair, close enough that the distance between them was no longer a statement, and looked at her grandson sleeping. Outside the window, the city was dark and still. Somewhere across town, a clock had already passed midnight. Christmas had arrived without ceremony, the way it does for people who are busy being somewhere that matters. Daniel got home at 1:15. The house was quiet. The television in the living room was still on some nature documentary, the volume low, the blue light of it moving across the walls. Sophie was asleep on the couch, curled under the blanket he had bought her 2 Christmases ago, the one with the small embroidered stars along the edge that she had picked out herself, and then immediately claimed was babyish, but had used every night since. He stood in the doorway for a moment. He looked at her the way he had looked at her when she was very small, and he would check on her before his night shifts, the particular, helpless love of a parent watching a child sleep, which is one of the few emotions that has no adequate name. He sat down on the edge of the coffee table, across from the couch. He took the folded piece of paper out of his pocket. He held it for a moment, feeling its weight, which was nothing, which was everything, and then he leaned forward and set it on the surface of the table gently. Sophie stirred. She opened her eyes, slow and blinking, and looked at him with the uncomplicated recognition that children have when they wake to find a parent watching over them. "Dad," she said. Not a question, just his name, spoken, like an answer. "Hey, Bug," he said. She pushed herself up on one elbow. She looked at him the way she always looked at him when she was trying to read his face. That careful, concentrated attention that had always made him feel simultaneously understood and exposed. "Did you fix everything?" she asked. He thought about the question for a moment. "Not everything," he said. "I lost my job tonight." She was quiet for a second. "On purpose?" "Yeah," he said. "On purpose." She looked at him. She looked at the paper on the table. She reached out and touched the edge of it with one finger, not unfolding it, just acknowledging it. Then she looked back at him. "Are we going to be okay?" she asked. "I do not know yet," he said. "But yeah, I think so." Sophie sat up fully. She moved over on the couch, making room the specific, wordless invitation that children extend when they want you close. She patted the cushion beside her. "Sit with me," she said. Daniel sat down. Sophie pulled the blanket across both of them. On the television, something large and unhurried was moving through deep water. He did not pick up his phone. He did not think about the spreadsheet or the insurance or the job listings he would need to look at in the morning. He reached over, took the folded piece of paper from the table, and tucked it gently into the drawer of the side table beside the couch, beside the remote control and Sophie's library book. He sat beside his daughter in the blue light of the television on Christmas morning, and he did not go anywhere. 3 weeks later, Daniel accepted a facilities maintenance position at St. Clair Medical Center. The salary was lower than what he had earned at Harlow and Associates. The benefits package covered Sophie's cardiology appointments, her prescriptions, and her 6-month echocardiogram. He started on a Monday. The commute was 12 minutes. Diana Harlow was placed on administrative leave, pending a board review of the events of December 24th. The merger did not close. The company restructured over the following quarter, smaller than the worst projections, larger than the most optimistic ones. Some departments were reduced. No one in Daniel's former department lost their position entirely, though 3 roles were reclassified at lower pay grades. Robert Greer sent Daniel a letter in January. He did not open it for 2 weeks. When he finally did, it contained no threats and no recriminations, only a single line that said, "For what it is worth, I think you were right." Diana began showing up in Natalie's life the way weather begins to change gradually, without announcement, in ways that were easy to dismiss until you noticed they had been consistent for long enough to mean something. She came on Tuesday evenings. She brought nothing except herself. She did not talk about the company or the merger or the board review. She held Thomas when Natalie needed her hands free. She learned, slowly, how to be in a room without managing it. Natalie did not forgive her mother quickly or completely, but she stopped asking her to leave. There was no single moment of resolution, no conversation that settled everything, no embrace in a hospital corridor that erased 3 years of distance. What there was, instead, was a series of ordinary occasions: a Tuesday evening, then another in which two people sat in the same room and practiced the difficult, incremental work of becoming known to each other again. Daniel kept the piece of paper in the drawer of the side table. He did not add to it, but he kept it because he believed that some things should not be forgotten, not to punish yourself with them, but to remember what they cost and why they mattered and what you chose to do differently after. Sophie turned 12 in February. He took the day off work. He was there for the whole thing. Some choices cannot be undone, but some choices, made late and at great cost, are still the right ones, not because they fix everything, but because they prove, to the people who are watching and to the person making them, that it is still possible to choose presence over convenience, and people over position, and the call that is ringing right now over every deal that has ever been made in a room full of people who are trying not to feel anything.